Oh, I ain't got no favorites. I hate everybody but white men and black. They're the worst of the bunch. With the reds and the yellows, they don't think of nothing but sex. For their breakfast, their dinner, and lunch. Some of my best clients are Christian and Muslim, German and Jewish, French, Chinese, and Greek. To their mate, they are Hercules, Samson, and Atlas, but I know them as naked, they're human and weak. Why don't you knock off this all black and white nonsense and give yourselves up to the world's greatest cause? Pleasing a woman, whatever her colour, then haggle over what you think it ought cost. Grow wise to the world, grow a nut ball around you. Sex comes in all shapes, that's the maker's new plan. Choose any race, colour, language, or accent, and yous won't be alone, Mr. Cosmopolitan Man. Well, I bought myself a few seconds there to check all the tech, and that's indeed Dominic Behan's jingle. His doggerel, Cosmopolitan Man. I'm not Dominic Behan, I'm John Coleman from Apocatastasis-Institute for the Humanities, an alternative college and high school here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. This recording is an unusual recording. It's an after-action report of an event we've lately held. I will explain the circumstances of that momentarily. This presentation will concern the film The Fall of the Roman Empire, and necessarily it will involve history. And so for my one and only plug in these recordings, I draw your attention to our great website, ApocatastasisInstitute.wordpress.com. If you have the good pleasure of going over there and the good sense, you will see one of the tabs about the school. And because this presentation concerns Rome, I especially bring your eyes to our School of Arts. And therein, we have all sorts of topics and standalone classes where we look at history, we look at Latin as well, and many, many, many topics besides that. Historiography, logic, Greek history, modern history, Roman, medieval. We offer it all. We teach at an undergraduate level, and we accept students of about 15 years of age on up. In addition to our fine standalone courses, we also offer other options. We have a 3-year undergraduate program of study of the integrated humanities, which you're not going to find at any other college, where our subjects are synced with each other over the course of 3 years of study. We also have a monthly subscription option, as well as other opportunities as well. Let me take a look, in fact, at those. Travel and Man. Yeah, we have the monthly one. Yes. And then I knew I was missing one. And then we have the short classes option, which is a condensation of a full 16-week course of study, which is a typical college semester, down into 4 very intensive days. And so all of those options are written up on our website. Now, to the circumstances of this recording and why it is unusual. We're going to be discussing the fall of the Roman Empire. Last week, as of this recording, we had a private discussion on this topic. We run a number of such events each semester for the general public. It is the obligation of schools, and particularly colleges, to help with general education of the public. The reason for that, perfectly Enlightenment. Not that I have all good things to say about the Enlightenment, but there's some light spots therein. And one of those is an educated populace, because you cannot have a self-governing society without an educated populace. You would not have the Bar Association running everything from the moment of your birth to your death, literally, if we had an educated populace. That's one aspect. You also need a virtuous populace. You also need a populace who have control over their capital and their means of sustenance. There are a number of reasons to explain our condition. One of those has to do with the fact that we've let ourselves become dummies. And so one of the ways corporately that we push back against that is through our open events program at the college. And lately we looked at this film. We watched it on our own time, and then we came together and had a chit chat. Unfortunately, there were technical difficulties on my end, and that led to the program starting later than I would have. Ideally, I would have recorded the first bit. So basically, what this is an after-action report, a meditation on what we discussed. Now, that is, in fact, a great opportunity as learners of whatever capacity, even autodidacts. That is an excellent opportunity to talk about that briefly before we get into our meat here. And that is taking time to reflect on our learning. We have the time we enjoy and benefit from with our scholars or with our authors. Maybe we're, again, self-studying. That's fine too. But we have the direct confrontation with knowledge. Few people prepare for that. Very few people prepare to encounter their event, and even less people meditate on what happened afterwards. Very few people, for example, read the mass readings when they go to church on Sunday beforehand. Even few of them meditate on them after the fact. If you're meeting a friend, very few people actually take some time apart and consider their relationship and the last interaction they had. Much fewer people consider the lunch or whatever after the fact. We're just constantly going. Same with sports. People show up for softball. How many of them prepare a few days beforehand, a few hours beforehand? How many of them do so after the fact? Stretch down, so to speak, and so forth. So this is a human phenomena. It's true in religion as it is in interpersonal stuff, as it is in physical fitness. We don't take time to contemplate. So actually, this recording is a good chance to do that. And with all of that being said, we have our main attraction here, the fall of the Roman Empire. Now, this is a 1964 film. If you are familiar with that epoch, especially in American movies, you know that this was the heyday of the sword and sandal films. And one of the things we brought up as to why that was, and that had to do with the heft that religious organizations had in these United States. There was a huge gorilla in the room at that time, the 40s, 50s, 60s, that the film studios in Hollywood had to contend with, and that was the Roman Catholic Legion of Decency and the Protestant Film Office. And for 5 seconds, the Roman Catholic and Protestant sectarians buried the hatchet, and in the 1930s, they confederated to create what was called the Hays Code. And that was basically a red button, let's say, that if there was anything, we'll say, against family values in the film, the ministers and the priests and such would roar and rail from the pulpits the following Sunday to their congregations, don't go see that film, and the film would fail. And it's an interesting chapter, more than a chapter in history. Continues all the way up to about 1972, 1930 to about 1972. If memory serves, this was only in these United States, of course. If memory serves, the first film that was produced after the Hays Code, the first studio film, was A Bridge Too Far, which is about the World War II invasion of Arnhem and the failure of that. And there was a bit of cussing in there. And The Pawnbroker was another one. I got some boobies in there for the first time, and it's been Katie bar the door since then. But all of that's a background to the fall of the Roman Empire, meaning, the type of sentiments of the Hays Code, also being religious, also tended to steer things or direct things towards what the audience wanted. And so you had this long splash of sword and sandals films, and I've used that expression. What do I mean by that? I mean films taking place in Bible times or kind of in the ancient world. They didn't have to strictly be religious. So some of the explicitly religious ones, most famously by far, would be Ben-Hur, which was actually a remake of an earlier movie. And then you had Barabbas, You had a little bit later, at the very end of that, you had The Greatest Story Ever Told, which is still, it's still on repeat on some of the film channels, especially around Easter time and so forth. After they turned Jesus into a kind of a gay-looking white dude from France, which is a persistent annoyance of mine, but that's another discussion. Likewise, you had, pertinent to our film here, you had the 1953 movie, The Robe. The Robe, which was a smashing success. And this followed, if I remember correctly, and if it didn't follow, it was preceded by Demetrius and the Gladiator. And this was about, basically kind of biblical archaeology, let's say, in a dramatic way. You also had 19... excuse me. The Robe was 1953. This film, The Fall of the Roman Empire, was 1964. So it's really very much in the guts of things. I was confusing the the film that came after The Robe. That was The Chalice, which is one of the cheesiest movies ever made. And then you had this, and then you had other ones that were kind of in the realm of the sword and sandal biblical story. And I think of The Physician, which was about an ancient Egyptian physician, doctor, mummifier, if memory serves. And then there were others, definitely a lot of the Cecil B. DeMille films beyond Ben-Hur, such as the Ten Commandments, right? Come to mind Samson and Delilah, Quo Vadis, and we can go on. So let's take a look at our movie here. There is actually a very good write-up on Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a great place to start. It's not a good place to end. Your reading should go beyond that, but it is a very helpful resource for us here. So it was directed by Anthony Mann, written by Ben Barsman, Basilio Frencha, and Philip Jordan. And the script went through a number of writings, including during production, which is not necessarily the best thing, but such is Hollywood. It was filmed in Spain. I was going to make the joke during our live presentation, of which this is a meditation, that Gaul looked a lot like Northern California, but I was wrong. Joke's on me. It was actually filmed in Spain, and it was filmed in the wake of El Cid, which was not a sword and sandal film, of course. El Cid is a medieval figure, but they had a lot of the sets around, and they had a lot of the actors still nearby, and so forth. A lot of the contracts could be renewed. And so immediately following El Cid, this project got underway. And it got underway because the director happened to have seen, with one of the actors, a copy of Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. And that is a late 18th century piece of historiography and, I dare say, literature. And if you have a chance to read a few snippets of Gibbon's text, you'll realize, my goodness, how history writing can be quite literary and very beautifully done, very poetically done. We read some of the snippets related to Aurelius and Commodus during our live event. And in any case, this influenced Anthony Mann to get this topic going, the fall of the Roman Empire. Now, Gibbon's text, which existed originally in 6 volumes, which I have republished in my possession. I have not done the republishing, but I have it in my possession. 3 volumes where each book has 2 of the original volumes smushed together. So I have the whole set, and it deals with everything basically, if memory serves, from the Antonines, which were some emperors which preceded Commodus in the 2nd century, all the way through Diocletian and Constantine and Justinian, I think it gets to. So the decline and fall of the Western Roman Empire. And so it's a massive topic. It's a topic well beyond a cinematic feature. There's no studio film that is capable of covering a topic like that. The closest you could get at this point I'm speaking of the early 2020s here, the closest you could get would be some type of a television series. Television could be very good for that, in fact. But there's no possible way in 2 or 3 or 4 hours, which is impossible for a movie, that you could deal with all of that. So what Mann did and what the subsequent writers did is that they focused very adroitly on the reigns of Marcus Aurelius and Commodus. And so we have, like a microcosm in a scientific petri dish, like a diamond where all the pressure comes together in this worthless rock that De Beers sells all your wives. You have a diamond, right? All this pressure. And what makes the vignette and so forth, vignette, the diamond, the petri dish of Commodus and his father Aurelius so interesting is that you see in their lives and in the transition of power into Commodus, you really see the beginning of the seeds which will destroy the Western Empire and will really destroy Rome as we know it. We're going to save that giant gorilla of a topic, whether Byzantium is Rome or is not Rome. That's a very interesting topic. But the point is, Rome as we know it, this whole Mediterranean empire, it begins to really start cracking at the time of Aurelius and Commodus. And we have in our two men here, we have quite a juxtaposition. Now, I should point out, in terms of the film production, you are seeing one of the film posters in the back, very, very 1960s. Those of you who read books from the 1960s and 70s, even to the 80s, will recognize this style of art, which was in novels as soon as films back then. Very, very dramatic. The opening words, the opening and, in fact, closing narration comes from the author Will Durant. Will Durant wrote, along with his wife Ariel, this series, which I'm constantly pointing out. I, in fact, just finished reading one of the volumes last night, Volume 8, Age of Louis XIV. But he wrote this world history, or at least Western history, throughout much of his life and the life of his wife Ariel. And he was a consultant. He was a paid consultant for this movie. And in fact, it was because of his biography, his autobiography, his dual autobiography with the wife, that I even learned about this 1964 movie. And Will Durant, besides providing pointers and stuff during production, also did the narration. He wrote the text. I do not think he actually recorded the narration, because I have heard recordings of Will Durant before, and he had a very high-pitched voice, and he had a way of speaking, just by the by, he had a way of speaking which was very 1920s, even though it was the 1950s, 60s, 70s. I think he died in 81 or 82, a day before his wife. Interestingly, exactly a day before his wife. And that's another interesting phenomena with old people. They die after living 70 years together. They die like within a day of each other. Anyway, Will Durant did have a quintessentially early 20th century voice, and it's something, if you know what that is and what that sounds like, I think like the Hindenburg dude. It's very much tied to a time period. Anyway, so he didn't do the recording, but he did do the text of it. And the zinger that we take away from the film, in the moral, so to speak, is that an empire is not conquered from without, except that it has been conquered from within. And this is something not just from Will Durant. This is something Oswald Spengler in the late 19th century would very much approve of. This is something, indeed, St. Augustine would very much approve of in his City of God from the 4th century, which is his own in action meditation on why the hell Rome is falling around him. The City of God, the Civitas Dei. And so this is an old idea. You've probably seen the Thomas Cole paintings, the Saga of Civilization. So in Marcus Aurelius and Commodus, we see that. We see really this germ, which is definitely in place by Augustus, in place by Caesar. These guys are 150 years gone. In the case of Sulla and so forth, back during that initial transition from the Republic to the Empire, but you really see another chapter opening in Roman history. Because what you basically have, in Roman history, you have 5 stages of Roman history. You have the kingdom period, semi-mythological period, where Rome is ruled by the Etruscans. Then they kick out Tarquin Superbus, and then you have on the 21st of April, 753, the birth of Rome, 753 BC, as we count things now. You have the birth of the Roman Republic. That carries on for 700 years, thereabouts, until Caesar. Okay, that's so your Roman kingdom, then your Roman Republic, where Rome is run by the Senate. But increasingly, the Senate has to keep taking steps back because of chaotic things. And then you have with Julius Caesar the dictatorship, which continues all the way, really, all the way until 1453 AD and the fall of Constantinople. The dictatorship, the emergency. So that brings Caesar to power. But nominally, the Senate is there. And yes, it's true that after Augustus, Caesar's adopted son, you do have a spate of wicked, incompetent emperors, but Rome is so wealthy and things are so well administered outside of the capital that it doesn't really affect things. Augustus was such a reformer that the likes of Nero and Caligula and so forth, as irresponsible as they were, didn't do much to damage the empire. And you did carry on prior to Marcus Aurelius. You did carry on through the Antonines. Gibbon says the Antonine emperors were really the pinnacle of Roman power. That certainly carries over to Marcus Aurelius in his own way. But at the time of Commodus, you see a shift. And you see a shift in various ways that the film depicts. One of which, not just important for Roman history, but for coming medieval history within the 3 centuries, let's say, after. That's a whole other can of worms. When does the medieval age begin? One of the things you see is hereditary leadership. So Commodus represents the first bloodline ruler of Rome. That, of course, become par for the course in the 5th age, the 4th and 5th ages of Rome. So just to finish up that line of thought, you have the kingdom, the republic, the empire, or what's more properly academically called the principate, and then you have the dominate. The dominate is that time in Western Roman history of Diocletian's reforms and the results of that. And then I alluded to a 5th one, and that is Byzantium, or the Eastern Roman Empire. But the Romans who lived in Byzantium for the next 1,000 years did not call it Byzantium, and they very much believed they were in the continuity of Romulus and Remus and Aeneas and those dudes. The point is, what you also see in the life, especially of Commodus, is willfulness, luxury that's now damaging the empire, and also something you see in the late Principate and Dominate proper, real rebellions and plots and coups to sever parts of the Roman Empire. And what a face as my camera freezes up. We had a good run of it. But now we got this fella here. So, the integrated camera for the win. What we also have is Indeed, things like what we see in the subsequent years to Commodus, Zenobia's Syrian kingdom. We see endless plots before and after Commodus to sever Egypt away. Egypt is this economic powerhouse, and then Spain is always a problem and things like that. So something else that comes about in the film, and great amounts of money must have been spent to reproduce these battle scenes, but we have the barbarians, and we have one of the running themes, as we're going to conclude with just a few words from this article that I've been teasing you with here. One of the running themes that we have is this barbarian, the relationship of the empire to the barbarians. And what comes about by the end of the film is that one of the pressures on Commodus is to let the barbarians into the empire, right? So that you begin with let's say fighting. Marcus Aurelius in history spent a great deal of time fighting the Marcomanni and various German tribes, and he had a lot of other fighting with the Persians in the east, which is made mention of. You get this opening scene with Alan McGuinness, who was Obi-Wan Kenobi. And there are some big shots. There's some big stars in this, actually. Charlton Heston was supposed to play one of the characters. We have Omar Sharif, who plays a kind of stereotypical Oriental, kind of a generic Easterner. We have Sophia Loren, who is actually very much alive. I was quite surprised, and keeping up as much as women in their 90s can do. Keeping up the looks, and there were a number of other stars as well. There was Paul Newman. Paul Newman's in the movie as well. And there's this great cosmopolitan scene where Marcus Aurelius, or Obi-Wan Kenobi, is greeting all of the vassals of the Roman Empire who have queued up for a kind of a parade in front of him. And this guy's from Egypt, and this one's from Nubia, and this one's from Gaul and Scotland and Spain, and you get this idea of the vastness in the scene, the vastness of the Roman Empire. But you do have this topic of the barbarians, and how does Rome exist with the barbarians? And that's one of the subplots, because you have one of the characters, Marcus Aurelius's heir apparent, not Commodus, but his choice, and then Commodus comes to power. You can watch the film for that. There were a number of plot points which reminded me actually of the Ridley Scott movie Gladiator, including that subordinate that's chosen, but then Commodus comes to power because everyone has to take a step back, because Commodus is going to start a civil war if he's not given power, so it's better just to tolerate Commodus than to enter into civil war again. And you have all of these topics. So let's just read a bit here, and we'll go our own ways in this meditation after. So this is entitled, as I'm sure you've had a chance to read, Emperor Commodus, Was He Really So Terrible? Written by Edward Whalen, a contributor writer. Let me just see if I can blow this up some more. There we go. Are we looking good here? Yeah, I'll take that. Okay, so the Roman Emperor Commodus, 161 to 92 AD, is widely regarded as one of the bad emperors and a bloody tyrant. This image has been perpetuated in several movies, especially The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, 64, and Gladiator in the year 2000. Just want to check something here. The image, I don't think it's called The Decline and Fall. I've been calling it just The Fall of the Roman Empire. Yeah. So it's Samuel Bronson's The Fall of the Roman Empire. So this article has a little bit of an error in it, but that's okay. His reign and life were extraordinary, even by the standards of the Roman Empire. However, what was the legacy of Commodus? And was he as evil as an emperor as is often made out? Now you have two strikes against this article because it has a typo in it. The early life. We'll skip that. We want to get to the reign here, because that's what the film focuses on. Marcus Aurelius died in 180, and he was mourned by his entire empire. Keep in mind, the Romans did not refer to the emperor as an emperor, nor did they refer to this time period as an empire, all the way until the Muslims conquered Constantinople All the Romans, East and West, consider themselves Roman, living in the Roman Republic to the end. The person we call the emperor was simply the first citizen, which is maybe a workaround, but want to put ourselves in the shoes of these figures. Commodus became the sole ruler of the Roman world. The first thing that he did was to end the war with the Germans, the Macromani, and decided not to annex them, this is now the third error, second typo, and turn them into a province his father had conquered. Many believe that this was the right strategic decision. That's the fourth error. I should probably stop reading this right here. Many believe this is sloppy writing. This is what you call passive writing, where there's no need for that type of writing. Commodus returned to Rome, and he turned over the reins of government to the corrupt Praetorian prefects. We know little of the early years of his reign, but it appears that after a conspiracy to assassinate him, he became paranoid. Commodus's paranoia turned to cruelty, as could be seen, for instance, when he tried to kill the woman he loved, his mistress, more than once. She probably should have gotten the hint the first time. He soon devoted all of his energy and his passions, and he virtually handed the government of Rome to Cleander, a Phrygian former slave. Commodus also had a streak of sadism, delighting in tormenting and torturing the disabled. Sadism, Marquis of Sade. Sadism, John. Sadism. That's my Latin pronunciation. You do pronounce vowels a little bit differently, so mea culpa. However, his overriding passion was gladiatorial games, which is something Hollywood just loves to get a kick out of whenever they talk about Commodus. The Roman elite was obsessed with the bloody sport, but Commodus took it to extremes. He would fight in the arena. Now, there's a big scene at the end of the fall of the Roman Empire. This is basically the climax, where Commodus fights basically Marcus Aurelius's choice, and there's a whole coup. And a lot of this stuff actually was recycled for the Gladiator movie. A lot of this plot stuff. He would fight in the arena, which was against all social norms of the time. In the early years of his reign, he would invite gladiators to his palace in staged combats, and he would try to kill them. Typically, he would be armed, and the gladiators would be armed only with only with imitation weapons, which reminds you of that old story with Teddy Roosevelt. Why do they have the teddy bear, right? The Teddy Roosevelt bear? Because Teddy Roosevelt was hunting, and all the rich guys, they were in the habit of having their prey, bears, or whatever they were hunting, their servants would go ahead and tie them up so that all the rich guy had to do was just shoot them. And Teddy Roosevelt came and he freed the bear. So then the toy makers made the teddy bear. It reminds you of that. So Commodus has the real weapons, and the gladiators are real gladiators, but they have like tinfoil weapons, so they're going to lose. The deck is stacked. And this stuff, by the way, with hunting and whatever, this stuff goes on today. They'll have these wild game that are in these preserves in Africa, and the rich dudes go in and they pay $50,000 to shoot a lion in a cage or something. Nothing new under the sun. Anyway, it was not. If this was not bad enough, he decided to participate in the gladiatorial games in the Colosseum in Rome. He would appear as a gladiator and would kill the disabled and would slaughter the gladiators. All of his victims would have been tied up or unarmed. They didn't stand a chance. Commodus was certainly bloodthirsty. However, he used his displays at the games to demonstrate his power. His slaughter in the arena demonstrated to his many enemies his cruelty, and this made people afraid of him. Commodus's extravagance in the arena was such that he almost bankrupted the empire. To pay his debts, he was forced to devalue the coinage, which wreaked havoc on the economy. Tu autem domine miserere nobis. Okay, so the last point in the film I did want to bring up before we part ways is the set. At the sets in general. So there are some great scenes here. A lot of money, as the Wikipedia will tell you, a lot of money went into filming this. And very little came back. This was a total flop in the box office. Not like the Chalice or the Silver Chalice because it was cheesy. But I suspect there might have been some other, I haven't confirmed this, but there are one of the things that helps explain flops is big shot movies being coming out like a week or two or a month before. The movies in those days really stayed in the theaters for a month or two. So we have a large footprint. And so that may explain why there was little reception. It might have been by 1964. There might have been also oversaturation in the sword and sandal market. So we can maybe reprise that on our own study. But you have great battle sequences. This is obviously at a time before CGI, so those are real extras. You also have a lot of use of animals and horses, and a lot of training of the horses, and some very, if you think about how much moving parts there were in some of those chariot races in the movie, and all of this was live action. And what effects there are all practical effects, not special effects. You realize it was really quite outstanding, the type of feats they were able to produce, especially with those horse scenes and the chariot scenes and so forth. Those were all live action, and I was thinking when I watched this again, what the insurance man on the set was thinking when he saw some of those scenes being filmed. And then you have the final scene here. Although, I mean, this scene of the forum appears a bit, but the final scene does take place here. And this looks to be 1/3 scale or 1/2 scale. So these are huge buildings, and this was one of the biggest sound stages of the time. There was a lot of money and a lot of energy put into the sets on this, and you can see that. I believe this set of the Forum was the largest set in the world, in fact. And if you look real close, you can see people on the upper reaches here. I should probably know the architectural terms for that. Do you see up here in the upper right? You see there are people here, the kind of trumpeters and things. So that gives you an idea of how big this set was. And then you have all these extras. And so again, looking, at the normal height of a man, and then looking at the buildings and knowing what the real buildings are. I'd say about 1/3 to 1/2 scale, and still very impressive nonetheless, which makes you appreciate the real Roman architecture that much more. But yeah, there we go, with the fall of the Roman Empire, an after-action report from our free events at Apocatastasis. So I would invite everyone to please head over to our website and learn about our college, learn about both our tuition programs, our undergraduate degree, our standalone classes, as well as our events for the public. We offer elements of the Divine Office every single day during the school week. We have open events. We have a naturist club that we have many events for as well. And we're going to have Busking Dante. We're going to have our street theater program, depending on the response later this spring, summer, we'll see. But we want to get back in the saddle after COVID knocked us off the saddle for a couple of years there, do some poetry in the park. And we have other works coming as well. We're in the guts of our 9th year, and we have some very special things that are going to be unveiled around Easter time, which is our birthday at the college on Holy Saturday. So anyway, find out about the college and maybe consider taking one of our courses or attending one of our events. With all of that, I thank you for your attention, and please enjoy watching The Fall of the Roman Empire. You can get it on various video sites for free online. Thank you so much. Take care now.